Most people think tracking expenses is about writing down what you spend. That's exactly why they fail at it within 2 weeks and never build any real wealth. My name's Brad, and I'm going to show you why everything you've been told about managing your expenses is backwards, and more importantly, what actually works. This isn't theory. I spent 23 years figuring this out the hard way, made every mistake possible, and eventually hit financial freedom at 47. Not because I made a ton of money, but because I finally understood what expenses really are and how to control them without feeling like I'm living in a prison. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Tracking expenses the traditional way is miserable. It's tedious, it makes you feel guilty every time you buy something, and worst of all, it doesn't actually solve the real problem. I'm going to explain what the real problem is, and once you understand it, managing money becomes 10 times easier. Let me start by telling you about the biggest lie in personal finance. Ready? Here it is. The lie is that you need to know where every single penny goes. That if you just track hard enough, budget hard enough, restrict yourself hard enough, you'll magically become wealthy. That's complete garbage, and I'll prove it to you. I tracked every expense for 2 full years when I was in my late 20s. Every coffee, every tank of gas, every grocery trip. I had spreadsheets, I had categories, I had pie charts. I knew exactly where my money went down to the cent. You know what happened? I was still broke. Actually, I was more stressed than before because now I had all this data showing me how broke I was, but I had no idea what to do about it. The problem wasn't that I didn't know where my money was going. The problem was that I had no system to control where it was going before I spent it. That's the difference that changes everything, and most people never figure this out. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to lose weight and someone tells you to write down everything you eat. So you do. You track every meal, every snack, every bite. At the end of the month, you look at your food journal and realize you ate way too much. Great. Now what? You still don't have a system to eat less, you just have a record of your failure. That's what traditional expense tracking is. It's a record of what already happened, not a plan for what should happen. Now, I'm not saying you should ignore your expenses. That's the opposite extreme, and that's just as stupid. What I'm saying is that obsessing over tracking is the wrong focus. The right focus is on controlling your expenses before they happen, and that requires a completely different approach. Let me break down the real problem with expenses, and this is something I wish someone had explained to me when I was 25 instead of me figuring it out at 40. There are only 2 types of expenses that matter: fixed obligations and everything else. That's it. Forget about all those fancy categories like food, entertainment, transportation. Those categories don't help you make better decisions, they just make you feel organized while you stay broke. Fixed obligations are the things you agreed to pay on a regular basis. Your rent or mortgage, your car payment, your insurance, your phone bill, any subscription you signed up for, any debt payment you owe. These are dangerous because they're automatic. They come out whether you think about them or not, whether you can afford them or not, whether they still make sense or not. And here's the thing that blows my mind. Most people sign up for fixed obligations without ever calculating what percentage of their income those obligations represent. I see people all the time making $50,000 a year with fixed obligations that eat up $35,000 of that. That means they only have $15,000 for the entire year to cover everything else. Food, gas, clothes, emergencies, saving, investing, living life. $15,000 divided by 12 months is $1,250 a month. Good luck building wealth on that. But they don't see it that way. They see each obligation separately. The rent is only $1,500. The car payment is only $400. The insurance is only $200. The phone is only $80. The subscriptions are only $60. It all seems manageable in pieces. But when you add it up, you've chained yourself to expenses that make building wealth nearly impossible. This is the first huge mistake people make. They let their fixed obligations grow too large relative to their income. And once you sign up for them, you're stuck. You can't just stop paying your rent. You can't just cancel your car loan without consequences. You've locked yourself into a lifestyle that requires you to keep earning that income just to survive, let alone get ahead. I made this mistake in my early 30s. I was making decent money, working in oil and gas, and I thought I could afford a nicer truck. The payment was only $530 a month. I signed a 6-year loan because the monthly payment fit my budget. What I didn't realize was that I'd just committed 76 months of my life to paying for a truck that was losing value every single day. That's $38,000 over the life of the loan, plus interest, so actually closer to $42,000 for a truck. If I'd taken that same $530 a month and invested it instead, even at a conservative 7% return, I'd have had over $50,000 at the end of those 6 years. But I didn't think about it that way. I thought about whether I could afford the monthly payment, and that's exactly how they get you. The second type of expense is everything else. This is where most people completely lose control because these expenses feel small and optional in the moment, but they add up to massive amounts over time. This is where you actually have power and flexibility, but most people waste it because they have no system. Here's what I mean by a system. Every month, after your fixed obligations are paid, you have a certain amount of money left over. Let's say it's $2,000. Most people treat that $2,000 like it's all available to spend, so they spend it. Groceries, gas, eating out, random stuff on Amazon, things they want. Things they think they need. By the end of the month, the $2,000 is gone. Sometimes they even spend more than $2,000 and go into debt. Then next month, they do it again. The problem is they never decided ahead of time what that $2,000 should do. They never gave it a job, so it just disappears into whatever catches their attention. This is why people can make good money and still be broke. It's not because they don't earn enough, it's because their money has no purpose beyond disappearing. Here's the system that changed everything for me. It's so simple it sounds stupid, but it works. I call it the 3-bucket system, and I promise you this will do more for your finances than any amount of expense tracking ever will. Bucket 1 is fixed obligations. We already talked about this. These are locked in. The goal here is to keep this bucket as small as possible relative to your income. I recommend no more than 50% of your take-home pay, but ideally closer to 40%. If your fixed obligations are higher than that, you need to figure out how to reduce them as soon as possible, even if it means making uncomfortable changes. Bucket 2 is future you. This is the money that goes towards saving and investing before you spend a single dollar on anything else. This is not optional. This is not what's left over at the end of the month. This happens automatically right after you get paid. I put 20% of my income into this bucket. But even if you can only do 10% right now, that's fine. The point is, it happens first, not last. Bucket 3 is present you. This is everything else. Food, gas, fun, life, whatever you need or want. And here's the beautiful part. Once buckets 1 and 2 are handled, you can spend bucket 3 however you want without guilt, without tracking, without stress. Because you already took care of the important stuff. This is the system I should have been using in my 20s instead of wasting time tracking every transaction. Because here's what happens when you use this system. You stop making stupid decisions with fixed obligations because you can clearly see how much of your income they eat up. You stop failing to save because saving happens automatically before you can spend the money. And you stop stressing about every little purchase because you know the important stuff is handled. Now let me tell you what happened when I finally implemented this in my late 30s. I sat down and calculated that my fixed obligations were eating up 62% of my income. 62%. No wonder I felt broke all the time. I was broke. I had trapped myself with obligations that left almost nothing for saving or living. So I made some hard choices. I refinanced my mortgage to a lower rate, which saved me $280 a month. I sold that stupid truck I mentioned earlier and bought a used vehicle with cash, which eliminated a $530 monthly payment. I cut every subscription I wasn't using at least twice a week, which saved another $140 a month. I called my insurance company and shopped around for better rates, which saved another $90 a month. Those changes dropped my fixed obligations from 62% of my income down to 43%. That freed up almost 19% of my income on a salary of $70,000 a year take-home. That's over $13,000 a year that was previously locked up in obligations. $13,000 that I could now redirect toward building wealth instead of just surviving, and I didn't track a single expense to figure this out. I just looked at my fixed obligations and asked myself which ones I could reduce or eliminate. That's the power of focusing on what actually matters instead of getting lost in the details. Once I had my fixed obligations under control, I automated my savings. 20% of every paycheck went straight into investment accounts before I could touch it. At first, this felt scary. What if I needed that money? What if an emergency came up? But you know what I learned? I adjusted. When you automate your savings first, you automatically learn to live on what's left. Your spending naturally adjusts to fit the space available. This is the opposite of how most people operate. Most people spend first and try to save what's left over, but there's never anything left over. There's always something else to buy, something else you need, something else that seems important. When you save first, you force yourself to make your life work on less. And humans are incredibly good at adapting when we have to. After a few months of this system, something crazy happened. I stopped stressing about money. Not because I was making more, I wasn't, but because I knew exactly where I stood. My obligations were under control. My savings were happening automatically. And whatever was left in bucket 3 was mine to use however I wanted without guilt. This is the freedom that everyone talks about wanting, but almost nobody achieves because they're focused on the wrong things. They're focused on tracking and budgeting and restricting instead of building a system that works automatically. Let me give you some real numbers to show you why this matters so much. When I was spending 62% on fixed obligations and saving nothing, I was stuck. Every year that passed, I was in basically the same financial position. Actually worse, because I was getting older with no retirement savings and no investments. I was on a path to work until I physically couldn't anymore, and then hoped Social Security would somehow be enough. Once I cut my fixed obligations to 43% and started saving 20%, everything changed. That 20% on a $70,000 income is $14,000 a year, invested at an average return of 8%, which is pretty standard for index funds over long periods. Here's what happens. After 10 years, I had over $200,000. After 20 years, I had over $640,000. After 30 years, I had over $1.7 million. Same income, same person. The only difference was the system. And that's with never getting a raise, which obviously isn't realistic. Most people's income goes up over time, which means the amount you can save goes up too, which means the numbers get even bigger. But let's say you can't do 20% right now. Let's say you can only do 10%. On $70,000, that's $7,000 a year. After 30 years at 8%, that's still over $860,000 from just 10%. That's the difference between retiring with dignity and working until you die. And you don't need to track expenses to make this happen. You just need to set up the system and let it run. Now, I want to talk about something that trips people up. They hear this and think, okay, I'll set up automatic savings, but then they don't do anything about their fixed obligations. So they automate 10% savings, but their fixed obligations are still eating up 60 or 70% of their income, which means they only have 20 or 30% left for everything else. And then they can't make it work. They end up pulling money out of savings to cover regular life, which defeats the entire purpose. You have to do both. You have to get your fixed obligations under control first. This might mean making changes you don't want to make, moving to a cheaper place, getting rid of an expensive car, canceling subscriptions you like but don't really use enough to justify the cost. These changes suck in the moment. I'm not going to lie to you, it sucks to downgrade your lifestyle. But here's what nobody tells you. The pain of downgrading is temporary. You adjust within a few months and stop caring. But the benefit of having your finances under control is permanent. It compounds year after year after year. 5 years from now, you won't remember or care that you moved to a smaller apartment in 2025, but you will absolutely care that you have $100,000 invested and growing. This is the trade-off that separates people who build wealth from people who stay broke. Wealthy people are willing to be uncomfortable now to be comfortable later. Broke people do whatever feels good now and deal with the consequences later. It's that simple and that hard. Let me tell you about the other big mistake people make with expenses. They focus on the small stuff and ignore the big stuff. I see this constantly. People will stress about spending $5 on coffee but won't think twice about a $700 car payment or $2,000 rent on a place that's bigger than they need. Here's a simple truth. Small expenses don't matter much. Big expenses matter a lot. If you get your big expenses right, you can be pretty loose with small expenses and still build wealth. But if you get your big expenses wrong, it doesn't matter how careful you are with small stuff, you're still going to struggle. The big expenses are housing, transportation, and fixed obligations like debt payments. Get those three things under control, and you've solved 80% of your financial problems. But most people do the opposite. They lock themselves into huge housing and car payments because they don't think about the long-term impact, and then they try to make up for it by cutting back on things that barely move the needle. Stop buying coffee is the worst financial advice ever created. You know why? Because even if you buy a $5 coffee every single day, that's $150 a month. Over a year, that's $1,800. That sounds like a lot until you compare it to the $4,500 a year you could save by having a car payment that's $300 less per month, or the $12,000 a year you could save by living in a place that costs $1,000 less per month. The coffee is not your problem. Your car payment is your problem. Your rent is your problem. Your student loans are your problem. Those are the things that actually matter, but they're harder to fix, so people avoid dealing with them and focus on stupid stuff like coffee instead. When I finally got serious about my finances, I made a list of every fixed obligation I had and asked myself 3 questions for each one. First, do I still need this? Second, can I get it cheaper somewhere else? Third, what would happen if I eliminated this completely? Those 3 questions helped me cut about $1,800 a month in fixed expenses. That's $21,600 a year. And I'm not exaggerating, I literally cut that much. Some of it was big stuff like the truck, some of it was medium stuff like insurance and subscriptions. But all of it added up to a massive change in my financial situation. And once I did that, I stopped worrying about small purchases. I buy coffee whenever I want, I go out to eat, I buy things I enjoy, because I know my foundation is solid. That's the freedom that comes from focusing on what actually matters. Here's another thing about expenses that most people get wrong. They think being frugal means never spending money on anything. That's miserable, and it doesn't work long term. Real financial intelligence is spending money on things that matter to you and not spending money on things that don't. For me, I don't care about fancy clothes or jewelry or status symbols, so I don't spend money on those things, but I do care about having a nice workspace at home and taking trips to see my family. So I spend money on those things without guilt. Because my system is set up correctly, I can afford to spend on what matters to me without sabotaging my future. You need to figure out what actually matters to you and what you're just spending money on out of habit or because you think you're supposed to. Most people waste tons of money on stuff they don't actually care about just because it's what everyone else does or because they haven't really thought about it. I spent years paying for cable television even though I barely watched it. Why? Because that's what you do. You have cable. It never occurred to me to cancel it until I actually thought about whether I was getting value from it. I wasn't, so I canceled it and saved $120 a month. That's $1,440 a year for something I didn't even use. Multiply that by all the other things people pay for without thinking, and you see why so many people struggle financially despite making decent money. The goal is not to be cheap. The goal is to be intentional, spend money on purpose, not on accident. And the way you do that is not by tracking every transaction. It's by setting up a system that forces you to make good decisions automatically. So let me give you the exact steps to implement this. This is what you should do today, not tomorrow, not next week, today, if you actually want to change your financial situation. Step 1. Calculate your fixed obligations. Write down every single thing you're committed to paying on a regular basis. Rent, mortgage, car payment, insurance, phone, internet subscriptions, debt payments, everything. Add them all up and divide by your monthly take-home income. That percentage tells you how much of your life is already spoken for before you even start living. Step 2. If that percentage is over 50%, you need to start cutting. Go through each obligation and ask those 3 questions I mentioned. Do I still need this? Can I get it cheaper? What would happen if I eliminated it? Be ruthless. This is your financial life we're talking about. Nobody's going to fix this for you. Step 3. Automate your savings. Set up automatic transfers that happen right after you get paid. Start with whatever percentage you can manage, even if it's just 5 or 10%. The key is making it automatic so it happens before you can spend the money. Step 4. Stop tracking every little expense. Seriously, stop. It's a waste of time and mental energy. Once steps 1 through 3 are handled, whatever's left is yours to spend however you want. You don't need permission. You don't need to track it. Just spend it and enjoy your life. That's it. That's the whole system. It's not complicated. It's not sexy. It's not going to make me rich selling you a course, but it works. I've been using this exact system for over 15 years now, and it took me from broke and stressed to financially free. And let me tell you what financial freedom actually means. It doesn't mean I'm rich. It doesn't mean I have a mansion or a yacht or any of that stuff. It means I don't stress about money anymore. It means I have options. It means if I want to take a month off work, I can. It means if I want to help someone I care about, I can. It means I sleep well at night knowing my future is handled. That's what this is really about, not impressing anyone. Not having more stuff, just having peace of mind and options. And you get that by controlling your expenses through a system, not by obsessing over tracking every dollar. Most people will watch this video and do nothing. They'll think, yeah, that makes sense, and then go back to doing the same things they've always done. And 5 years from now, they'll be in the exact same position, wondering why nothing ever changes. Don't be most people. Take the next hour, sit down, and figure out your fixed obligations. That's all you have to do right now. Just that one thing. Once you see the number, you'll know what needs to change, and then you can actually change it instead of just hoping things somehow get better on their own. Watch the next video.